And welcome to the AV Forums podcast for Monday the 16th of May. And joining me on this edition are Mark Botwright.
I promised I'd take her to WrestleMania.
Audio reviewer Ed Selly.
They say it's dog.
News editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Remember, trust the fungus.
And assistant editor Steve Withers.
Oppressor of the proletariat.
So welcome back to the AV Forums podcast. We're recording this on Friday the 13th, but as none of us are superstitious in any way whatsoever, means absolutely nothing. Am I right?
Other than a series of films, obviously.
No. I'm about to use public transport, going to the capital, do all sorts of active and exciting things. So, you know.
Mind you, that's what NASA thought with Apollo 13 arriving at the moon on the
that was a pure coincidence.
I know, but it is quite funny that I've been told, well, you sure you want to call it 13? No, we're ridiculous. It comes after 12. We're not superstitious. And then that one blew up. So, there you go.
Yeah, I still find it strange that some aircraft that you get onto go from row 12 to row 14.
Quite common, actually. Surprisingly common. I noticed it recently, but I'll tell you who are the most superstitious people of the lot, the Cantonese in Hong Kong. You rarely find, because
it's 4 and 9, isn't it?
4. No, well, 4
is Japanese.
Unlucky because it rhymes with death, the character. That for 4 is similar sounding to the character for death, but also because it's got a Western influence, they don't like 13 either. So you won't find buildings with a 4th floor, 14th floor, 13th floor, 24th floor, 34th floor, anything like that. And they also will queue up to change their phone numbers if there's a 4 in their phone number.
What's their version of the lottery like?
I reckon you should be absolutely right. You should be picking lots of like 4, 14, 24, because if that does actually come up, you're going to win the whole thing on your own.
Anyway. Welcome to the podcast. Also, breaking news as we come on, Top Gear is back. Are we going to sample it? Are we going to watch it? It's back on Bank Holiday weekend, Sunday night, the 29th of May. Obviously, Chris Evans, you got Chris Harris in there, who I predicted would be on there. Rory Reid, who is the editor of Rocombu, and some people might know him from CNET. Who else is on there? Sabine
Eddie
Schmidt.
Bloody Jordan.
And Matt LeBlanc.
I was seriously thinking with Eddie Jordan, I wasn't going to watch it. If his presence is kept to an absolute minimum, I'll give it a shout. But
well, like I say, I mean, he's not in the official lineup of presenters, and I can't remember seeing him in the trailer.
I did see him in a trailer. He was driving definitely in the trailer. Maybe he's just a guest star driving a car. I don't know. And they've also announced the title of the Amazon show, haven't they? The Grand Tour. Ultimately, it'll be interesting to see. The presenters are obviously, it's an instrumental part of it, but quite a few of the people that made Top Gear what it was in a visual and a sort of, you know, planned out sense have either gone on to the Amazon exercise or they've left to go and do other things altogether. And I think that's going to be a more interesting test.
Although saying that, looking at the trailer, the cinematography still looks pretty nice. I mean, that was always one of the big reasons I liked Top Gear. I wasn't that necessarily a big fan of Jeremy Clarkson and the rest of them. I put up with them because I liked the cars that they always had on there, and I also really liked the cinematography. I thought there was a lot of talent behind the camera for a lot of the seasons. I think it started to wane a little bit towards the end when it got into silly challenges. But certainly a lot of the car reviews, I remember the Aston Martin Vantage V12 with the 360-degree camera.
What done to Brian Eno?
Yeah, that was fantastic. The way they shot that was really good. For BBC and limited budget, that was really, really nice looking. And going back to some of the older series, I remember the RS4 going up a mountain trying to race mountain climbers, and some of the cinematography there before the days of drones. A lot of aerial shots and that kind of thing. So there's a lot to be said for the production values and the cinematography and so on. Not sure myself about the presenters. Chris Harris, I really like Chris Harris. I watch a lot of his YouTube stuff. I think he's a good presenter, not pretentious in any way. Whereas Evans, I can't be doing my Evans nowadays. I used to like him back in the day, TFI Friday and all the rest of it.
Don't forget your toothbrush.
Yeah, I liked him back in the day. Now I find him just too pretentious. I find him. I actually believe a lot of the stories that have popped up in the press this week about, you could just see him being quite a bully, and a bully to people and round about him and that kind of thing. And a few of the others are untested. I mean, Serene, she did the German Top Gear, didn't she, for a while? So
I believe so.
Be interesting. Any other car nuts on here, Mark?
No, I'm afraid not. As I say, I'll be interested just to see how well it does, because it always seems to me like there were two sets of people who liked Top Gear. There are the people who particularly liked the presenters and the mad challenges, and then there are the people who really were just tuning in, as you say, for the cinematography because it looked fantastic. And, I think most of those people will tune in again. I don't think they'll really miss the presenters.
Yeah.
I think it's been overplayed.
Yeah, I think for a long time it was Ed the only place that you could really see Exotica and see it being driven and so on. But nowadays with the internet, with the likes of internet channels such as I'm trying to think of the young guy who's he's been made a millionaire overnight with the videos he does. Is it Shmee?
I've heard about. I know of this person. I don't know anything about.
You know, and channels like that where Exotica's featured all the time, and in places like Monaco and so on. You could say that the glamour's kind of gone out of it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yes, there's been a democratization of access to interesting things and so on and so forth. But there is still the nature of how things are shot. I mean, it's interesting going back. One of the very last examples of it for me was when they did the Porsche 918 round the Abu Dhabi circuit.
Yeah,
that I just don't know of anyone shooting anywhere else where they made it look like that.
Yeah, the blue flames coming out the exhaust, and and going back to old Top Gear, I think what really made it was some of the stunts and the challenges they did. They got silly towards the end, but there's some really genuinely jaw-dropping stuff that they did. And the one that always sticks in my mind was the Reliant Robin that they made into the space shuttle with the booster rockets and stuff, and they actually launched it up at Otterburn Army Camp. That was just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. I mean, we don't know the dynamic of the presenters with one another. That's another absolutely key aspect to this. But let's see. It would appear, judging from the increase in the number of people, it's like they now have a driving contingent and a bantering contingent, and we'll see how the dynamics of splitting it quite so obviously breaks down. But I will give it a crack of the whip. I don't think it clashes with Hawaii 5.0, so we'll see how it goes.
And to wrap up on the motoring section, we'll go to motoring expert Hodge.
The non-driver. I'd not thought about it until you've asked the question. I won't go out of my way to watch it. I'd lost interest in the old stuff anyway. If it's on and I'm sat down in the chair and there's nothing else, I'll watch it. That's my ringing endorsement.
That's your marketing tagline.
Yeah.
I mean,
if there's nothing else to do, I'll watch it.
Steve mentioned it's the Grand Tour, the new Top Gear that's not Top Gear with the 3 original presenters. Quite interesting, because I looked at that and I thought, why have they called it that? But it's short as GT, isn't it? So that's quite clever thinking now, actually. And it'll be interesting to see if that chemistry lives up or whether that's just going to fall flat in his face. And do we get one episode a week, or are they going to release the whole lot as just one series in one go?
Be interesting. We'll see how it goes. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't look like they have any. There's no evidence thus far of any sort of studio bit to it, is there? So they could record them all back to back.
I think I was reading that they're going to take they're going to tour, but they're going to take the studio audience with them. So they're going to go around the world, but they're going to take the audience with them around the world, which I thought was a bit strange. I couldn't
That
quite.
makes sense, given the title, though, doesn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose. We'll just have to wait and see. So do we have a Ferrari up to win, Mark?
Yeah, we've got 2 Testarossas this week, in addition to Hustlers on Blu-ray, which is open to members until the 20th of May, and the Pump Audio headphones mega giveaway, worth a total of exactly £614, is open to all members until the 22nd of May.
I'm almost scared to ask this question. Do we have a winner?
Actually, topically, we do, and he goes by the name The Stig, which is 230, by the way. The Stig 230 won The Labyrinth on Blu-ray.
Does that mean there are 229 other
Where the hell have you gone?
forums?
You're stupid.
Yeah.
Do I sound all right now?
Yes.
Yes, you sound a bit better now.
You're now in the same room as the microphone. It's a substantial improvement.
I said, does that mean there are 229 other Stigs? The Stigs on AV forums.
Some say.
Yeah, some say it's time to move on, and swiftly, at speed. Right, so we're moving on to hardware news, and Picture Perfect has reared its ugly head again, Mark. Actually, we're looking at doing the refresher. We've got 3 out there because the Euros and the Olympics are coming, and we want to make sure that AV Forums members and our listeners have the best looking TVs.
Yes, we have. And the first thing you want to do is, if in case, I'm sure most regular listeners know, but
Buy a decent TV.
Buy a decent TV. And if you can't
Good
do
start.
that, change your crappy TV into its right picture mode. So it will not, and we repeat, it will not be the sports mode, which are universally awful on any of the manufacturers that have such a thing. They just make the greens luminous, they make the sound really weird, they stick the motion processing on really high, and yeah, they just look disgusting. I don't know why they bother with them.
When you say it's sports mode, it's actually how you see things if you were on a massive amount of steroids.
Yeah, well,
That could be true.
I was looking at one manufacturer's one, and it was Man City that were playing, but and they were in the home kit, but it didn't look like a home kit. It was almost yellow, and I don't know how they managed
That's a
that
hell of
when
an
it's light blue.
achievement, isn't it?
It's freakily unrealistic, some of these things. So yeah, that's your movie mode, your cinema mode, your THX mode, theatre, Hollywood, that kind of thing. You get the idea. So that's your first step in getting.
But
to
Mark, the experts out there who've been doing this 20 years say that makes your TV look like it's in the 1970s.
Oh, I see. Yes.
I'm
Well,
using the term expert very loosely.
Extremely loosely.
well, as we are all aware, there are standards to which TV and films must adhere, and those modes are the closest. So,
if I want to see the TV program as is intended to be seen, as it was shot, and how it's processed and put through the whole transmission line to my TV, I want to be in these modes so I can see it as it's intended. Is that right, Mark?
that is exactly right, Phil. So those people saying that those modes are outdated or washed out or whatever they say are wrong, in a word. So yeah, go into that mode, and then you want to make sure that you're seeing the whole picture. So a lot of TVs, a little bit less these days, with the modern ones, when you switch into those modes, will automatically overscan, which is a hangover from the standard definition days when you get noise in the perimeters of the picture, normally at the top, little black and white bits of noise. But that it's not really a problem with HD at all, unless you're on. We get the odd outside broadcast from local news, you'll see it, but that's about it. So you choose your aspect ratio. There's normally a button, a picture size, or a button with a kind of a rectangular grid on it that will choose your picture ratio, aspect ratio. So we, and then we need to hunt out the overscan settings. Now, they could be hidden anywhere in your menus. Typically, they're in the picture menu in a picture options section, but they're not necessarily in there. So we've, if you go to the website, we've got a special article on that and a helpful video which will show you how to take off the overscan, so you're not losing out on any of the resolution and you're getting the absolute full picture. And then there are any number of video processing controls, depending on how high-end your TV is, the more it'll generally have. But let's just run through a few. We've got energy saving settings or eco settings, which tend to, they lower the power and they can adjust the brightness of the screen on the fly. Depending on the sort, they've got light sensors built into the TV. So if the room's really bright, the picture will get brighter. If the room goes a bit darker, say a cloud comes over the sun, the image can darken. It just can be a bit distracting and just negatively affects the picture. If you've got an LED TV, you don't really want to be worrying about energy consumption anyway. They're so low in consumption. We've got controls called things like dynamic brightness and contrast. Which again will adjust the picture on the fly and try and accentuate dark and bright areas of the picture. Often that just ends up crushing detail at either end of the scale, and they can also cause your picture to fluctuate. Now, dimming features. Now this is a little bit more tricky. There are good dimming systems. Normally they're exclusive to full array local dimming TVs, although some of the edgelets, they do a reasonable job nowadays. Slight personal preference, but as a rule of thumb, if you know your TV is an edgelit based one, switch it off. If you've got full array local dimming, a backlight system behind the TV, switch it on, but generally in a low setting. Otherwise, we can have blooming effects and brightness in areas you don't want it. We have things like edge enhancement, which is essentially a sharpening tool. That kind of just, as the name would suggest, it adds an extra line of definition to the edges on the screen. So actually it's cutting down on resolution, even though It might make things look a bit sharper. It make things look a bit more standout. It's actually it's typically like a single line of pixels.
Pixels?
Pixels. I did say picture. I
Don't
didn't.
start that again.
No, I'm going to say it. A single line of pixels outside an edge or a border. So you've lost resolution and not actually gained it, as the name wouldn't suggest. We have noise reduction features. Now, these can be useful if you're watching some crappy thing off YouTube or some really horrible Freeview broadcast where you're getting lots of noise, particularly in the dark areas. But if you're watching a nice HD broadcast from the ITV or the BBC, you really shouldn't be needing these to switch them on. So things like MPEG noise reduction or digital noise reduction, just get them off. Motion processing. Now, this is pretty subjective. Now, I think most of us here certainly would, for most of the time, switch them off, which they can cause movement to look really unnatural, over smooth, the soap opera effect, as it gets called. But then again, some motion interpolation systems don't do that. If you have them on in a really low setting, and if you find everyone's eyes are different here. So if you find you're upset or blur bothers you, there are in the better TVs there are settings that can get rid of that without making it look too soapy. So we just encourage you to really have a play around with those and see what suits you. But for for the love of God, do not have these engaged in high settings, because they really do look.
Well, you're going to add. It's not just a faker.
Awful.
You're going to add a lot of. And basically, it's guessing what's coming next. And it can only guess on what the image was before and what it might be after. And what happens then is you add loads of artifacts. So you can actually riddle the screen with loads of things that shouldn't be there and make it look worse than it was with emotion. So you need to be really careful with these things. However, I've been experimenting with the camera that we use for making our videos here, and it has a 50p and a 60p mode. And if you go and look at our CES videos, you probably wouldn't have noticed it the first time you looked at it, but we shot those in 50p. And they play back on YouTube at 50p, and they look really nice, and it doesn't look like soap opera, which says to me that if sports broadcasters could start using that technology and broadcasters could start broadcasting with 50p or 60p, we're going to get rid of the soap opera effect for sports and drama, and some dramas where I don't think it doesn't add the soap opera effect. It just improves motion, and it looks a lot nicer. And I've got to say, I was really impressed with it. And if you didn't notice it on our CES videos, go and have a look at them again. Nice little plug for people to go back and look at our videos. But you will notice that we do quite a few movements of the camera and that kind of thing. And it just looks really, really nice.
Yeah, I can't wait for sport to be at 120 frames per second. That will look pretty amazing, I would think. I've seen some World Cup footage at 1080p 60. It was taken at 1080p 60, and it looks brilliant. Like I say, I wouldn't particularly want it. You wouldn't want it for your movies, but in terms of sport and really fast-moving content.
Yeah, I'd add that with Gamalog HDR.
Yes.
Which we had demonstrations of on the Dolby Vision stand at CES. It was obviously Dolby was closed door, but they did have a section of the stand where they had I think it was a rugby game, if I remember right, and it was in a stadium where half the pitch was in shadow and half the pitch was in bright sunshine, and it had the normal SDR on the screen next to it, and then the Gamalog HDR next to it, and it was like night and day. You could see detail in the shadows. They weren't having to use the iris, which is what they would normally do. So there'd be somebody sitting in the control outside broadcast wagon. So when the ball went into the dark area, what he'd do is he'd open up the iris so it makes it brighter, so you could see what was happening. And then when it went in the bright areas, he would turn it down. So trying to keep the image the same. Whereas with the Gamalog, no need to do that. You can get away with the guy in the wagon doing that because everything is visible. It was fantastic seeing that. It really opened my eyes to what HDR was capable of doing.
It did, as Mark just mentioned, that it was 4K at a higher frame rate. So it looked really impressive, actually. Particularly because, as you mentioned, it's quite fast-moving sport. A lot of balls being thrown around and guys running around on the pitch. It looked fantastic.
Yeah, you like that, don't you?
I do like rugby.
I like rugby.
Yeah, some butch men and tight shorts.
Yeah, I am aware of the homoerotic undertones of the sport, but I still find it very exciting and enjoyable. I prefer it to football, which I just despise with every fibre of my being these days.
Yes, and because it's watched by grown-ups, we're still allowed to consume alcohol in the stadiums and other exciting things, so...
That's why Ed likes it.
So anyway, back to the Euros. Basically, we are now finished with the picture perfect stuff. Mark, is that right?
We are, as far as I know.
Okay, so those articles are on the homepage. If you want to get your TV, fine tune it for the Euros, you're welcome to look at those. Also, go to avforums.com/picture perfect, where we walk you through absolutely everything to do with setting up your TV and finding test patterns and all the rest of it, and taking you from just putting it in the correct picture mode all the way through to making sure your brightness and contrast and sharpness and everything else is set correctly. So you know you're getting the best picture possible, not just for your TV, but for your room and for the environment that you're watching it in. And I think a lot of people, Steve, still forget that, like audio, when it comes to the picture, your room environment and the conditions within the room have a huge impact on what you actually see on screen.
They absolutely do. It's one of the reasons why we always caveat our recommended settings by saying, obviously, that's for the specific TV that we were reviewing in our specific reviewing environment. And every room is different. You know, the colour of the walls, the amount of ambient light, all those factors are important. And when you're setting your TV up, you need to take that into account, which is another reason why we also recommend a night and a day setting, because very different viewing environments. At night, you don't want the image to be too bright because that can be fatiguing to watch. But during the daytime, when there's maybe a lot of ambient light in the room, you want a brighter image to combat that ambient light. So, yeah, absolutely. The viewing environment is a key factor in your viewing pleasure, basically.
Okay, let's go and talk about Nintendo, and let's get Mark Botwright excited for a minute there, and you tell us all about it, Mark.
Well, there hasn't been much news this week, but one thing that has come out is that the next mobile apps from Nintendo, which will be an Animal Crossing app and Fire Emblem, will be free to play. This came from the DNA chief executive, told the Wall Street Journal. It comes on the heels of their Miitomo app, which was more of a social app, but it also seems to have been used as some kind of a trial run just to see whether in-app purchases, that kind of thing, will prove to be a viable financial model for them going forwards. So as expected, well, by some, that they're going to be free to play. The big question is going to be just how they leverage those in-app purchases. With certain titles, that can come across as pay to win. With others, it could be something, just trivial. Animal Crossing obviously matches this quite nicely with the idea of kind of decorating your own little home, and it's a nice little kind of slow-paced title. Fire Emblem, perhaps less so, being more strategy, role-play game based. And so it's really kind of one of those times where a lot of people have been saying for a long time, why don't Nintendo go mobile? Why don't they just, put these things out there and they can make money? And it's been a long time coming, and it seems very much like Nintendo hopefully are getting all their ducks in a row. They've got this partnership with DNA, who they bought a 10% stake in. They're a kind of mobile and e-commerce specialists, and we're finally seeing the fruition of that expertise. Nintendo have faced this problem for a long time, which has been, how do you get non-Nintendo fans to play Nintendo games? And the simplest way seems to be right now, release small games that you can play on mobiles and tablets. Now, these can still have great depth to them. If the download figures for, say, Fallout Shelter before Fallout 4 came out, that was huge. And to make something profitable like that, it simply needs to have some system in place whereby people can achieve normal in-game targets naturally if they play in a regular way. But if they wish to take some kind of a shortcut, then, if they wish to purchase extra items, things that are purely cosmetic, say, then they can do so. And that's basically where we're at now.
So, if they get it right with Animal Crossing, they will make a fortune. Because both my girls played that game, and they got obsessive about it. Like you say, you just doing up your own little pad, but you have to work quite hard for the in-game currency to get these items or get anything worthwhile. And if you can make those 69p for a candelabra or something, they could absolutely make a mint if they pitch it right. But like you say earlier, it depends on the game. Like, so Fire Emblem doesn't suit so well, or maybe Mario Brothers game does not suit quite so well. But and also they've got a whole load of games ready for the small screen that are designed for the small screen as well. So if they get it right, they could make a mint off this. But with being Nintendo, the questions arise: will they get it right?
If they get it right, it's it'll be a license to print money.
I mean, the last crossover for Nintendo was obviously the Wii, which was now some time ago, Mark. Do you think that they're pinning their hopes on the apps being the next thing to kind of cross over and get the general public interested in Nintendo again?
Yes, I think it's also the fact that they've kind of drawn away from traditional marketing. I think they've been looking for a way that they can kind of engage their fan base, and certainly this partnership with DNA seems to be also focused on how can we get across, when you've got your latest game out, rather than simply having a boarding on, a Champions League football game like, a PlayStation 4 exclusive would have, or, your big commercial in the middle of the Super Bowl or whatever. How do you find different ways to get across to people that you've got this new title out? And it's also just a simple way to try and reach that new audience. As you say, they've had success in the past expanding the market. However, everyone's migrated now. The Wii was a one-time thing. It's looking more and more like the outlier on the graph of Nintendo fortunes. And with everyone having kind of migrated to mobile and tablets, then that's a good place to kind of chase them to.
And is it true that you're keeping them afloat?
No, I haven't bought a single amiibo yet. So those are the things that are keeping them afloat. That's the kind of thing. And that shows, with just these kind of small little figures, I think it shows the number of people who haven't even bothered to use them on the games at all. Just they're using them to collect. There's a huge amount of nostalgic value attached to Nintendo, but there are also, they're not just basing their business model on trying to leverage nostalgia. As Mark says with his kids, stuff like Animal Crossing, it really does kind of chime with that new audience, with a kind of younger crowd who, they're not going to bother with trying to pick up something on an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4. The titles that are more universal and will cater to that younger audience are still on Nintendo consoles.
Yeah, okay. Let's move things on. Let's go to audio next. Let's look at an AV receiver from Pioneer. It's their top AV receiver. It's the LX89. I surmise that this is going to get a highly recommended badge because people don't make bad AV receivers anymore.
I don't seem to, no. I've got to say that this is the first Pioneer we've seen for a couple of years. Didn't see the LX88, but did review the LX87, and I think, Ed, you reviewed the LX57 2 years ago.
Like
so I'm pleased to see that Pioneer have made some changes. I don't know, these may have been applied last year, but certainly compared to the 87, they've made some definite improvements. One of the big improvements for me is that they've got built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. No longer do you have to use a separate device that you attach. That was virtually impossible to actually get to connect to anything. Now it's really easy. So that's a massive, massive improvement, because I swear to God, the old Pioneer stuff was I mean, even going through the manual, it was difficult to work out exactly how to.
Pioneer should have sold that to NASA. If you were able to get that up and running, you were ready to do anything else that NASA asked you to do. It was unbelievable in that day and age that a major company was trying to get
maybe it was an undercover test. Maybe it was a case of they could tell who got it online and they were whipped away and taken to a secure
that's
location.
The only logical explanation, because it certainly wasn't any use as a day-to-day means of gaining internet access to the product.
No, it was outrageous. So that's a massive improvement in itself. You can now set it up for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi very easily. It's all built in. They have aerials in the back of the receiver. Great. Obviously, they've added DTSX support, which will be added with a future firmware update. So again, that's all present and correct. The previous generation that I reviewed, although it had 11.2 channel outputs, it could only actually process up to 9.2 channels. This can do the full 11.2, so you can do a full 7.2.4 Atmos or DTSX configuration, which is great. So you got that. In terms of HDMI, it does support full HDMI 2.0A with HDCP 2.2 and HDR and Rec 2020. But, and this is the weird thing, not on all the inputs. So the 3 outputs do, and 3 of the inputs do, although not the rest, which is strange. You think they just use them on all of them, but there are 3 inputs. That should be more than enough, by the way. I don't think I can have more than 3 different Ultra HD 4K HDR sources at the moment. So that's not a major issue. It's just strange that they did that. Also, the naming convention is very weird because it's HDMI 1, then BD, then HDMI 2, 3, 4. HDMI 5 is the one at the front, and then there's 6 and 7, so slightly strange. And aside from that, though, and that's a minor complaint, and then remote control remains, although it's had a bit of a facelift, it's still not great. It's still full of little fiddly tiny buttons that are all pain in the arse to use in the dark. But otherwise, it's really good. I mean, it's classic Pioneer. It's powerful. It's beautifully made. It's a gorgeous looking receiver. It's built like a tank. It's got loads of power, but it's quite nuanced in its performance. I quite like MCACC, their own proprietary room EQ system. It's not up there with some of the best out there, but it works quite effectively, particularly at the lower frequencies. And all round, it's a really solid, really good receiver. And you're right, Phil, it won a highly recommended award.
Natural selection has whittled it down now, so it's only the companies that had any aptitude for making AV receivers still making AV receivers.
Yeah, and what I like is the fact as well that even though they're now one company, Pioneer and Onkyo are keeping their designs and their products separate, which is good to see.
Well, I think if nothing else, there's the real-time demonstration from Denon and Marantz that trying to merge it is very, very hard because you've normally got two different groups of engineers who have assigned different priorities to different bits and bobs. So actually trying to do much in the way of platform sharing is very, very hard and often ends up compromising both products for their core member base.
I mean, obviously, talking about cooperation, Ed brings us on to the next subject nicely, and that's Kef and Lin getting together. Tell us about this one.
Right, this is Lin's Exact system. Lin do not like the word they don't like the phrase room EQ or anything like that. This is an optimization system. It's currently quite a fashionable and big part of an increasingly large part of many high-end audio systems, in so much as Lin debuted Exact some time ago. I actually went up for AV Forums to go and have a look at it. I wrote a report. You can dig it out of the archives. It effectively very closely maps an amplifier to a pair of loudspeakers, and essentially the almost everything is handled in the digital domain, and some alterations and some tweaks can be made to the performance of the loudspeaker, knowing its proximity to walls and so on and so forth, that you can use to dial that out. Now, when this crock came out around originally, it was very much something that Lin were keeping in-house, and it was for Lin speakers. I think Lin's hand has been slightly forced here because another brand, Devialet, with their products, they introduced a system called SAM, which does a very similar process, and they said, tell us what speakers you're using, Devialet customers, and we'll get it configured and done. And they have been adding speakers at a phenomenal rate of knots. So Lin have broken quite a long-standing habit of trying to keep everything in-house, and they have been adding other manufacturers' products to the list of speakers that you can use with this Exact system. That has been something that's been ongoing for a while. We saw products from another speaker company called Kudos about a year and a half ago, but now we've actually got a big name, if you like, involved in this, in so much as Kef have announced that they have been working with Lin, and you can now buy one of the reference models with Lin Exact processing and amplification, and the two will get on like a house on fire, and it allows you to configure the speakers in such a way as, going back to what I said, you can, if the position in the room is less than optimal, you can just gently alter the response, gently alter the behavior of the speakers so as to dial out some of those issues. I've had some demonstrations in the past. It's extremely good. It's very benign. It avoids what we've discussed in the past. It avoids that sense of something sounding very artificial and very heavily played about with. And if they've done that with the Kefs, the chances are it's going to be quite an impressive system, although not one that's going to be small change.
I mean, obviously the PR has been very much seriously superior speakers and all these buzzwords and all the rest of it. If we cut through the BS, what are you expecting at the end of the day, Ed?
I'm expecting that you would be able to use what is a large and pretty potent loudspeaker in rooms where if you used it under normal circumstances, you might get far too much overdriving of the room, far too much interaction with side walls, rear walls, etc. You'll be able to dial all of that out. You wouldn't need to have an absolutely point perfect towed in exactly 2 meters apart sort of positioning with them. They'll be much more flexible in that regard, and you'll be able to just get more out of the basic performance envelope of the KEFs without having to put as much effort or indeed have a great room to start with. That's what they're aiming for. It's a little bit of real world convenience to high end audio.
I guess the elephant in the room though is these are not going to be cheap because you're talking about KEF reference speakers, which aren't cheap to start with. So why would you go down that route rather than going down something like, say, Dirac, which basically does the same thing?
Well, in so much as Exact as a system is more than just EQ, in so much as it's a fairly flexible way of collating a lot of different inputs and doing, handling very, very complex systems, bringing it all into a single sort of app-controlled environment. And it ultimately, whilst Dirac in the SR250, for example, is extremely good and does something similar, it's ultimately a product at the £2,500 price point. I would certainly hope that the Lin system is going to give you that little bit more in just overall performance. So certainly Lin's digital decoding and certainly their UPnP streaming and the like is comfortably superior to anything that's using Dirac at the moment.
Okay, so some interesting stuff this week. That is hardware news. We're fast running out of time as we always do, so we're going to move on in a second. One thing we didn't mention, high-end AV receiver group test. That is coming up, Steve. What's it going to feature?
It's going to feature the Anthem MRX 1120, the Arcam AVR 850, the Denon AVR X 7200 WA, the Pioneer LX 89 that I just mentioned a few minutes ago, and also the Yamaha RX A3050. So all cracking receivers. Finding a winner out of that lot was not easy. So if you want to find out who wins, read the article.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Don't spoil it for us.
Bloody hell! How many speaker connections did you make and unmake during the duration of that test?
A lot. Well, I mean, it's 11.2, so there's what's that? It's 13 a time.
Well, actually, the real question is how many banana plugs cracked or snapped while you were doing that, because that's normally the thing that happens.
I'll tell you what, banana plugs are the best invention ever.
They are but
wire those up every time, you'd go nuts.
Yeah, they're great, but I always find that after about 3 or 4 months they start to weaken, because obviously in and out, and it starts to weaken them. And I actually now go into Richer Sounds whenever I'm passing, and I'll buy 3 or 4 boxes.
I actually, shameless plug here for QED's airlocks. I find those are very, very robust. They stood up to a lot of abuse over the years, and Cord Company, their own. If you buy pre-terminated lengths, which I appreciate isn't cheap, those are nice plugs, and they've been quite clever. That there's very few points of stress when you're removing and fitting the plug, so they're quite long-lived as well. But yes, I agree with you. I mean, there are some, especially with some high-end manufacturers who are using silly materials in their plugs. They are designed to be connected and left for 20 years, and that's it. If you make and remake them, they will fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, I will give them a mention here, and that's the Cambridge Audio ones. The cheap $2.99 a pair, or is it $4.99 a pair? They're cheap anyway. That's the ones I buy. Do the job, and like I say, now and again they'll snap off, but that's because we're basically abusing them. It's, if you're buying them for your own system, you plug them in and you leave them, whereas we're swapping out lots of kit all the time, and in and out, and you're going to get breakages and stuff. But I have to say, those have served me well for the last 10 years, and they haven't changed the design much either, so they're obviously working.
I'm going to be interested to see who wins that. I'll be very, very interested to see how that goes.
Well, it's on the homepage, Ed. Away and read it. Right.
Oh, is it actually there? Oh, blimey.
No, it's
No,
not there
it will
right
be when
this
the
second. Will
podcast
be.
goes out.
Oh, yeah, but I was going to read it on the train on the way to that London.
Well, you can read it. It's in the CMS. It's just
Oh, yeah, I
people
can.
listening to the podcast right now on the Monday or whenever it is. It should be on the homepage now for you folks. Okay, moving on. Let's have a look. No, there's no reviews. So it's movie news next. You pay for that cinema pass, but it doesn't look like you go to the cinema anymore, Steve.
I haven't been going very much this year, no.
Why is
It's
that? Why is that then?
Doesn't
It can't be work because you're not doing any more
No,
than you
there's
normally
just not that many films that I really wanted to go and see. I am
Really?
going on Wednesday to go and see the film I'm about to talk about. So,
Right, which would be?
X-Men Apocalypse, the latest in the ever-running X-Men franchise, which has had its ups and downs. Certainly, it had a bit of a nadir when it came to X-Men Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine.
How many have there been, Steve? Because I think I saw the original one, and then I maybe saw the sequel to that, and I haven't seen any of them since then. So how many am I
This is the
missing?
9th film.
Jesus.
I think this is the 9th X-Men film. So yeah, it's had its ups and downs. Things did get back on track a bit after initially X-Men First Class, which was sort of a bit of a reboot, and then Bryan Singer came back on board and did X-Men Days of Future Past, which kind of reset the whole thing, combined the X-Men First Class cast with the original X-Men cast, and kind of eradicated issues with X-Men Origins and The Last Stand. And this is a direct sequel to Days of Future Past, there was a little teaser right at the very end of the credits for this film, involving the character Apocalypse, who's played by Oscar Isaacs. And in this particular case, the cast is all the new cast, the X-Men First Class cast. So you've got people like James McAvoy playing Dr. Xavier, and you've got Professor Xavier, and you've got Michael Fassbender playing Magneto, along with Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique. And it looks, in the trailer, it looks good. I'm kind of a little bit, it's going to have to be great because Deadpool was an X-Men film. It does take place in the X-Men universe, and Deadpool was great. It was really funny and really fresh and really original. And so X-Men Apocalypse is going to really have to deliver the goods in order to both keep up the standard that was set by Days of Future Past, and also, the kind of expectations that have been created by Deadpool. Obviously, it won't be as R-rated as Deadpool was. It's not going to have all the swearing and the sex and the extreme violence. But they need to, certainly Bryan Singer needs to up his game a bit to keep it fresh and original and interesting, with so much happening right now in terms of comic book movies. And particularly after what I thought was a really, really good film with Civil War, with Captain America Civil War, which I thought was a cracking movie. So it'll be interesting to see how that performs. And that comes out, well, it actually opens in the UK on Wednesday. So if you want to go and see it, you can go and see it on Wednesday. And then as opposed to the normal Friday opening, it's opening a little bit earlier.
All right.
And,
So
I'm excited about
So
it.
you're going to have a review for this next week then on the podcast?
I will, yes, I will. I will actually go to review.
Thank God for that. I've got to say, we keep coming back to this, not another comic book movie and all the rest of it, and but I have no interest in X-Men, so I won't be going to see it, and I probably won't pick up on this because it looks like I've missed about 7 films now, so that's quite a bit
We've
to
got
get.
a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, it's probably a bit too much catching up to do. I've still got 5 seasons of Game of Thrones to get through, so yeah, I'll be putting that in the back burner. But one thing I was going to ask you, because it just popped in my head, Guardians of the Galaxy. Are we getting a sequel to that?
Yeah. Next year, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Really?
Which is shaping up to look really good. They've got some great new cast members coming on board. Kurt Russell's joining the cast, I believe. Nathan Fillion. So yeah, I've got high hopes for that, because that was a really pleasant surprise when it came out. When was that? 2 years ago?
Yeah. I really enjoyed that. When it comes to comic book stuff, and I didn't realise it was a comic book stuff. But when it comes to that, I absolutely loved that. So I would definitely go and see that again. How many Captain Americas have I missed? I haven't seen any of them.
There's 3.
There's 3.
Oh, well, that's
that's
maybe
worth
doable.
watching.
That's maybe doable then.
Yeah, except it's not as simple as that, is it? Because it does. Then you also do need to do some Avengers as well, and some other bits and bobs.
Oh,
and
Jesus.
isn't part of it also the Thor: The Dark World is also part of it?
You don't need to worry about that. You could definitely watch Captain America: The First Avenger, The Avengers, Captain America: Winter Soldier, Avengers: Age of Ultron, and then Civil War, and that would be a very good.
There you go, Steph.
Five films.
Only
Five
five
films.
films.
But actually, you know, they're good. I mean, particularly, I enjoyed Captain America the first one. It had a nice sort of retro feel to it. Avengers is great. Captain America: Winter Soldier is excellent. It's probably the best Marvel film to date. Maybe not the most fun. I'd say the most fun remains Guardians of the Galaxy, but I think it's the best film they've made so far. So it's worth watching in its own right. Age of Ultron is not as good as the Avengers, but still need to watch it really in order to keep the continuity. And then Civil War is also excellent. So, there's some good films in there. So it wouldn't be a chore to go through those 5 movies, to be honest.
Are we starting to see a bit of a backlash? Because I see that ABC cancelled
Agent Carter.
Agent Carter. It's been dropped.
Is
it? Yeah.
How long have we been predicting the backlash and the bubble bursting, though?
Some
Yeah.
time.
It seems like
though,
at this point we should just ride out the "it's all a fad" line, and at some point we'll be proved right.
Yeah. Quite funny. I was watching some of the the honest trailers. I'm addicted to honest trailers. And I've been going back through some of their archive stuff that I haven't seen for a while, and it's a really, really funny one. I forget what the film it is for, but it's when DC had a little bit of success, and Marvel were absolutely. Oh, it was Captain America 1990.
Yeah.
And that was really, really funny. Even I got the jokes in that one, and I don't see comic book films. Mr. Botright, where do you sit? Because you're a bit of a gamer. I know you like comic books, and you also like a lot of Asian cinema and that. So you like all this kind of thing. Where do you sit with it?
I'm afraid generally kind of my kind of comic book status, as much as I still have a reasonable collection. I like certain kind of characters, certain franchises, that kind of thing, and beyond that, I'm afraid I just kind of tune out. So for me, it's kind of a little bit heartbreaking seeing them continue to plug away with the same profitable characters that everyone recognizes, and thinking, I'd really like them to kind of expand into something a bit different. It just seems like that at this point they found 3 or 4 things that they want to just keep doing until at some point it will prove unprofitable, and then they'll say, well, no one's interested in comic book films anymore. Whereas the truth will be, when the bubble finally does burst, it will just be due to absolute fatigue with, kind of flogging the Wolverine dead horse.
I've just looked at my to watch pile. I've actually got Age of Ultron in there. I can't even remember.
Don't even know you've got.
I can't even remember buying that. It's in the to watch pile.
They did a great thing last week on Honest Trailers, where they actually got the Russo brothers, who directed Captain America: Winter Soldier and Captain America: Civil War, to actually watch the Honest trailer for Captain America: Winter Soldier and then comment on the Honest trailer. And they said a really funny thing. They said, when we were writing Civil War, we said we actually had this point. We said, "Is this Honest trailer future? Is this Honest trailer proof? Is this are we going to get picked up on this plot point in Honest trailers?" So it's become a byword now for making sure your film holds together and won't get ripped to pieces by the Honest trailer team. So credit to them, I guess.
Yeah, they are very good at what they do.
Very good.
Very, very, very good. Right, let's move on. Blu-ray releases. What can I go and buy?
The big release this week is Creed. Now, when this was announced, I was like, oh, God, a film about Apollo Creed's son, and, is Rocky going to be in it? And, are they really just really milking this? But actually, having seen it, it's brilliant. It's really good. Way, way better than I thought it was going to be. Rocky is in it, obviously. He plays a mentor to Apollo Creed's young son, played by Michael B. Jordan. And it's called Adonis Creed, which is quite a good name. And it's really good. I mean, if you've grown up like I have with the Rocky films over the years, I found it an incredibly moving experience. I'm man enough to admit, on at least 2 occasions in the film, I cried. I openly wept in this film. And the fight scenes are really... No, I was there. I was blubbing like a pussy.
Is that because there wasn't enough baby oil being rubbed in?
No, it's just, there's a certain... I think I realised it was probably an emotional... You're talking about a lot of, how many 6 films before this, and they go back to 76. So, I've been watching them since I was a kid. And so it's a character that I'm invested in emotionally. And I'm going to admit, I teared up quite a few times in this. Plus, the fight scenes are fantastic. There's actually a single take fight scene in it. That I don't know how they must have spent so long rehearsing it. It looks really good. Honestly, it's a cracking movie. So if you haven't seen it, get it this week. You won't be disappointed. If you're a fan of Rocky, definitely buy it. But if you're a fan of quality filmmaking and a really good moving story with great performances and fantastic fight scenes, and if you like a boxing movie, get it. It's superb. It's absolutely
Does it have
so
Carl
much
Weathers performing in like an Obi-Wan Kenobi role?
You do
Stage.
see Carl Weathers some obviously footage from the other films on TV and that sort of stuff with Donas watching his father and honestly it's great. It's really really good. So much better than I thought it was going to be.
Who does he fight though? Because a big part of the Rocky films is always.
He doesn't fight. It's not so much like a Clubber Lang, or a Russian, built in a laboratory super killing machine. It's nothing like that. I mean, he fights real boxers. So Michael B. Jordan, he had to really train hard to look realistic and take it, in a ring with actual boxers. And so the fights, take it in the ring.
No, too cheap.
I was waiting for that phrase.
Honestly,
came for ring terminology, wasn't it? I know.
It's great. It's an absolute gem and a real surprise, and I recommend it.
I mean, to be fair, the original Rocky is an absolutely fantastic film. The sequels started to get a bit silly, as you say. The opponents started to get a bit ridiculous and all the rest of it. But the original Rocky, and it was never about winning either. It was about
the distance.
It was about going the distance. It was about being there and being the best that you could be and all the rest of it. And it set the tone for a lot of the films that followed in the 80s, like that. Yeah, montage sequences and so on.
I'm sorry, every film is improved by a training montage.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You have to have a montage.
They cleverly reference that kind of thing in Creed. Actually, they do some very very clever little nods and asides to the Rocky movies themselves and Rocky's fake history, if you like, with Philadelphia and the Rocky statue that's actually there in Philadelphia now and that kind of thing. And those steps that he runs up in Rocky, they do a sequence there as well. They're very clever and quite witty in terms of the way that they reference a lot of that stuff. Whilst remaining, faithful to the story and realistic to a degree.
Yeah, I kind of watch those films now without getting the Team America, we're going to need a montage song running in my head.
Well, I don't know. I'll see if it crops up on Sky Movies, Steve. I might give it a go then. I'll let you know if I weep.
Right, so moving on from Blu-rays, I'm probably not going to pick that up, Steve. I'll wait till it comes on Netflix or Amazon or whatever. But it sounds good. Moving on, Ultra HD Blu-ray, just for Mark. What's Mark going to spend his money on this month?
Well, there's not many major announcements in the last week. Obviously, this week in the US, Deadpool came out on Ultra HD 4K Blu-ray with HDR and Dolby Atmos, which is excellent news. Mine is on the way, but hasn't arrived yet, annoyingly. One bit of news that you pointed out to me, Phil, I mean, I'm assuming this is with anticipation of some future release on Ultra HD Blu-ray, but there's a new 4K remaster of Highlander.
Oh, good God.
I love Highlander, so I'm really up for that. So that's a new 4K remaster for the original camera negative. There's going to be a Blu-ray release in June, and hopefully at some point in the near HD 4K release as well.
Have they done an honest trailer for that? I'll have to go and have a look. That'd be class.
We should ask them. You can always email them and say, do an honest trailer from Highlander.
That bloody castle.
Yeah, I've seen that so many times on your footage now.
Yeah, well, that's it. You got a Scotsman playing a Spanish bloke, and you got an American trying a Scottish accent.
Oh, he's a Frenchman.
Is it French? Oh, sorry, Frenchman. Scottish
playing
accent.
a Scot, and a Scot playing an Egyptian Spaniard. It's very confusing, but I still love it. It's still great fun. It's a classic, absolute classic. The 80s classic, come on, you got to admit that.
And it did have a Queen score as well, didn't it?
Yeah. And pretty good. I mean, the song "Who Wants to Live Forever" I think is quite moving within the context of the film. So
the actual video for "Who Wants to Live Forever" is just it is the embodiment of the 80s in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Everything that was wrong with 80s music. Then levering in, how are you not dead? It's a kind of magic. Oh,
it's a kind of magic. Yeah,
you'd all forgotten that, hadn't you?
Yeah,
I like that line. It's a kind of magic.
Oh, shut up, Steve.
When he shoots the Nazis, whatever you say, Matt, you're the master race. Oh, come on, it's a great film. Well, they're fighting, the Kurgans fighting Sean Connery, and the entire castle collapses around them. Come on, this is genius. I'm really looking forward to that Blu-ray, even though I've got the Blu-ray already and haven't actually got around to watching it in the last 6 years. I'm still looking forward to getting it again.
To sticking that in the pile.
If anyone wants the original Blu-ray, by the way, in a steel, it's a steelbook. It might be worth some money. I better check that out on
in the forums.
Backpedal. Steve's not giving it away for free.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, but Ed blew me out on the PS3 though.
Well, I had to spend £138 putting the cat back together. So,
So it's
you know.
there for you, Mark, if you want.
Cat.
No, it's an old cat.
I thought it wasn't a
Hodge
your
was
cat.
sending me cheery messages over Skype about how I'm basically going to end up spending a decent car lease on keeping an animal of which I am in some periodically indifferent to from not dying. So we'll see how that goes.
Um, right, it wouldn't be an AV Forums podcast if we didn't talk about cats or Star Wars. So, Young Han Solo is going to be the next standalone movie. So this is 2018 December movie, isn't it? Is that
That's
right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because this year it's Rogue One, then, and next year it's Episode 8, and then
Nation.
so this is 2018. They've now found the actor to play young Han Solo. I've just looked at the photos. It might just be the photos that the Hollywood Reporter are using, but apart from the chin line and the nose, there's not a lot else there where he looks similar.
No, is an actor called Alden Ehrenreich, I think it's Alden Ehrenreich, who has been in a couple of films. He's been in Tetro, which was a Francis Coppola film from a few years ago, and also most recently he was in Hail Caesar, and he was very good in Hail Caesar actually. I think it's not going to come down to whether he looks like Harrison Ford so much as whether he can convey the swagger and the charm of a young Harrison Ford.
He looks more like Seth MacFarlane if you look at that photo.
Yeah, he was very good in. He certainly, I think he's got the chops to do it. I mean, I trust Chris Miller and Phil Lord, who are making this film. They're the guys that made Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the excellent Lego Movie, which was a real surprise, and also the very enjoyable 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street. So I think that they've got talent. They can make an enjoyable film. I mean, this is going to be, I think, a lot more comedic and irreverent than the other Star Wars films. I mean, if you look at some of this stuff, it's quite heavy. I think the idea of this film is going to be much lighter.
It has to be fun. I think that's where
fun.
The strong points of Force Awakens was Harrison Ford playing it for fun and having real fun with the role. And I think I'm going to offer you a job, and little lines like that. Playing to the camera as well and stuff. That for me was excellent, and of course he knew that what was going to happen, so he was playing it for everything it was worth. Really, they have to capture that in the young one, and he has to have more swagger, and he has to be more outrageous.
Yeah, I think there were definitely bits of Force Awakens which gave us a taste of what we can probably expect from this film, and if it plays it, for fun, and young Alden Ehrenreich can deliver the goods in terms of the swagger and cockiness of the young Han Solo, and they can get the kind of fun that they had in Guardians of the Galaxy, for example. If they can nail that, this could be a really, really fun movie and a really big success, I think. I mean, who doesn't want to see more Han Solo running around having a laugh with Chewie in the pre-Star Wars days, pre-Empire days, even possibly? Or no, it would be Empire, wouldn't it? It would be during the Imperial reign, but just having fun. I'm certainly, if you look at something like the Rebels TV show, that's good fun, and that's a similar kind of concept. So I'm actually quite excited by this.
Do you think we'll see the Kessel Run?
Who knows? Possibly, yeah.
Playing the young Chewie.
Well, Chewie, anyone tall, basically, I should imagine.
Chewie is essentially that Wookiees live a very long time, so essentially they're
Yeah,
ancient.
Chewie's a few hundred years old, so it's not an issue. Just need someone who's 6 foot.
Just need someone who's tall
Yeah.
and can go ah.
But again, in Force Awakens, I thought again, a lot of the comedy play and the comic play there with Chewie, and the way that they got the expressions through the mask and stuff, really good, really funny. There's quite a few funny bits. Oh, you're cold.
Yeah. No, I thought those bits were fantastic, and if they can keep that going, that kind of banter and the jokiness and the fun that we saw in those brief sequences with Harrison Ford and Chewie in this new film, then brilliant. And Chewie's must have been such a risk back in '77, thinking, it's basically a bloke in a suit. If it doesn't
walking
work,
carpet.
we're buggered,
Robin
because
just
he's a
broke.
major character. But actually, it's genius because you totally buy Chewie as a real character, as a real, not just as a character, but also as a living creature. You never think of Chewie as a guy in a suit. The expressions in the eyes, the mask that Stuart Freeborn made, really, really convey the character, and you never once think that's just a tall bloke in an ape suit, which is what it could have been. And so, yeah, I think this could be a cracking movie, and I'm actually, after seeing the Rogue One trailer, I'm so excited about this. The next few years of a Star Wars film every year for the next 4 years.
Yep.
Who couldn't want that?
Yep, I'm with you on that. Got to say, I think The Force Awakens, I'm starting to come to the conclusion now that the glossy's starting to come off that a little bit.
It's not that much cop, is it?
There's some really, really good elements in there, but like we said, they were playing it safe, and the more you watch it, the more you realise just how safe they were playing it. And you just think, right, okay, so JJ did it. We've got some momentum now. I think what's making me quite excited now is the fact that Rouge Nation, Rouge One, could be an absolutely stonking film. The more you look at the trailer, the more you look at the characters that are going to be in it, the action that could be there. You know what the final outcome is, but you don't know what's going to happen to any of these people that are actually in it. It could be that none of them survive. So there is a lot to buy into there, and they could take it so many different ways. So I'm excited now that the reins are off and they can go for it. And I think episode 8, let's hope they don't go too
That's
safe.
going to be a very different film. And episode 8 is being written and directed by Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson is a very, very different director to J.J. Abrams. I think that's going to be a completely different movie, and I've got really high hopes. It's going to be a lot darker, a lot more original, and a very different film to The Force Awakens. So, yeah, I think we've got an exciting few years ahead of us in terms of Star Wars fans.
Anybody else excited?
In general, as long as they can keep a decent level of variety up, with alternating films, I think they'll do very well. So long as it doesn't fall into the trap of being formulaic or playing it too safe. With regards young Han Solo, kind of mixed emotions about that. I've always been of the opinion that I don't really want to see backstories of characters, because it often tends to kind of rely on playing it for little in-jokes or moments where you can say, oh, that was a thing from the other film. I don't want to see, a run-in with Greedo or whatever. I'd rather keep it as it was. However, if they can get the humour right, I'm sure I'll tune in.
Yeah, I'll give it a whirl. I don't go to cinema particularly often, but I mean, Rogue One in particular, I think that looks extremely interesting. We'll wait to see details leak out on the Solo film, and we'll make a decision based on that. Really,
We could be getting Star Wars films on your birthday for the next few years.
yeah,
Yeah.
heady stuff. Well, it does at least give me a reasonable chance of getting out to see them, but we'll see how we go.
And I know Hodge will have fallen asleep by now. So on that bombshell, we are well out of time this week. So my thanks to Wake Up Mark Hodgkinson,
Cooper, you're a lousy leader.
Steve Withers,
Great. A building with athlete's foot.
Ed Selly,
191.
and Mark Botwright.
Was she corpulent?
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook.
I didn't see that. I'm sure you make these up.
Yeah, I reckon he's not even.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to start doing some checks. Make sure.
Spotlight fat checks.
Yeah. Anyway, don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can bookmark avforums.com for the latest reviews, news and video. And of course, leave us those iTunes ratings, 5 stars only, and we will read them out next week, because it's the end of the month podcast next week. Is it? Let me just double check that. Well, there's one on the bank. There's one on the bank holiday, but we'll do it next week if we remember. I'll put that. If we remember.
What a glowing endorsement.
We could be asked.
Hey, we aim to please. I'm Phil, and thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next Monday.